My name is Elena Santos, and I once did something most people wouldn't dare. I gave my eyesight to the man I loved, only to be betrayed by him the moment he could see again. From a blind artist to a mother deemed unfit, I rose, I fought, and I rebuilt my life from the darkness. But the most shocking part? It wasn't even the worst, or the most beautiful part of the story. Before I share my story, tell me where you're watching from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe if you've ever fought through pain for the sake of your family. Trust me, you'll want to hear what happened next. I used to believe in fairy tales. Not the Disney kind with singing princesses, but the real ones, where two broken people find each other and somehow make something whole. Thomas found me in a coffee shop in Soho on a Tuesday morning when the October rain was turning the city gray. I was sketching strangers, trying to capture the way loneliness looked different on every face. He sat down across from me without asking, his expensive suit somehow making the cramped cafe feel smaller. "You missed something," he said, nodding toward my drawing. I looked down at the businessman I'd been sketching. Tired eyes, shoulders curved inward like he was protecting something fragile. "What?" "His wedding ring. He keeps twisting it, like he's trying to remember why he put it on." I stared at this stranger who had just read my subject better than I had. Thomas Blake, I learned later. 6 years older, Puerto Rican heritage like my mother's side, but raised in Connecticut boarding schools that had trained the accent right out of him. He built things: skyscrapers, shopping centers, dreams made of steel and glass. He kept coming back to that coffee shop. Not for the terrible coffee, he admitted after our third accidental meeting. "For me, I want to see the world the way you do," he told me on our first real date, walking through Central Park as the leaves made the ground look like scattered confetti. "Everything you draw has this honesty to it, like you're not just seeing what's there, but what should be there." We were married 8 months later in his mother's garden upstate. Small ceremony, just family and the few friends who mattered. I wore my grandmother's dress, the one she'd brought from San Juan 50 years earlier. Thomas cried during our vows. Actual tears, not the polite dampness that passes for emotion at most weddings. Our apartment became something from a magazine, but warm. Thomas understood that I needed light, north-facing windows in my studio, skylights in the bedroom so I could wake up to actual sun instead of the gray reflection off other buildings. He hung my paintings everywhere, even the early ones I wanted to hide. "This is us," he'd say, standing in front of a canvas I'd painted of our hands intertwined. "This is how I want to remember us." When I got pregnant, he painted the nursery himself. Pale yellow walls with tiny elephants marching around the crown molding. He spent 3 weekends getting the trunk curves exactly right, standing on a ladder with his tongue poking out in concentration like a little boy. "I used to think I was building monuments," he told me, his palm spread across my growing belly. "Turns out I was just practicing. This is the only thing I'll ever build that really matters." The pregnancy was easy, probably because I had Thomas. He read every book, downloaded apps that told him when the baby was developing fingernails or learning to hiccup. He'd put his ear to my stomach and pretend to translate. "She says she's ready for Thai food again," he'd announce solemnly. "How do you know it's a she?" "Because she has your stubborn streak already. She's rearranging furniture in there." He was wrong about the gender, but right about the stubborn streak. Our son, Michael, arrived 3 weeks early on a snow day that shut down half of Manhattan. Thomas held him first, this tiny red creature who looked nothing like the peaceful babies in magazines, and I watched my husband fall in love for the second time in his life. The first 5 years felt stolen from someone else's dream. Thomas would come home from building other people's futures and help me build our own. We painted on weekends, not walls, but canvases. I taught him to see shadow and light, and he taught me that loving someone could be its own art form. He'd sit for hours watching me work, Michael balanced on his lap, both of them quiet as I tried to capture the way afternoon light fell across our kitchen table. Those paintings sold well. Bought us the house in Westchester with the big windows and the tire swing Thomas hung from the old oak tree. You're documenting happiness, my gallery owner said at my third show. That's rarer than you think. I didn't know how rare. I thought happiness was something you earned and kept, like a college degree or a driver's license. I thought Thomas and I had graduated into the kind of love that weathered everything. The morning of our 5th anniversary, he brought me coffee in the mug Michael made in kindergarten, lopsided and painted with handprints that looked more like butterflies. October morning, same time of year he'd first sat down across from me, but now our apartment smelled like pancakes, and Thomas was humming some song from the radio. "Happy anniversary, Mrs. Blake," he said, kissing the top of my head. "Where are we going tonight?" I asked, though I already knew. The restaurant where he'd proposed, the one with candles that cast everything in gold light. Same place we always go. Same table, same wine, same conversation about how lucky we got. "Boring people," I said, but I was smiling. The best kind. I should have paid attention to how easily he said that word. Lucky. Should have knocked on wood or thrown salt over my shoulder or done whatever superstitious thing would have kept the universe from listening. The last thing I remember clearly from before is Thomas adjusting the radio. Classical music, something with violins that made the car feel like a music box. I was watching him drive, the way his hands moved on the steering wheel, confident and sure. He caught me staring and grinned. "What?" "Nothing, just this, us." "Getting sentimental in your old age?" "I'm 29, Thomas. Ancient. I might need to trade you in for a younger model." I was laughing when the truck ran the red light. They tell me I was unconscious for 6 hours. I missed the ambulance ride, the emergency room chaos, the first surgery. I missed watching them wheel Thomas away. Missed the moment the doctors explained that glass doesn't always break cleanly. Sometimes it cuts so deep it takes everything with it. I woke up to white ceiling tiles and the sound of machines keeping track of things my body was supposed to do automatically. My mother was there, her small hands wrapped around mine, and I knew immediately that something was wrong with the way she wasn't smiling. "Elena, baby, how do you feel?" I took inventory. Headache, soreness across my ribs, a strange floating sensation like I was underwater. "Thomas?" The pause lasted forever. He's going to be okay. He's alive." "Where is he?" Another pause. "There was damage to his eyes, Mija. The doctors are still—" "What kind of damage?" But I already knew. It was there in the way my mother couldn't look at me directly, in the careful gentleness of the nurses when they helped me to the bathroom, in the silence when I asked again and again when I could see my husband. They let me visit him on the 3rd day. He was awake, sitting up in bed, but the bandages covered everything from his forehead to his cheekbones. His hands were moving constantly, touching the blanket, the bed rail, the space in front of him like he was reading Braille that wasn't there. "Thomas?" "Elena." His voice was different, smaller. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine. The baby's fine." "Good. That's good." His hands went still. "I can't see anything, Elena. Not light, not shadow, nothing." I tried to think of something to say that would fix it, but there are no words for the moment when you realize that some things can't be repaired. You just sit in the hospital chair and hold the hand of the person you love while they try to navigate a world that's suddenly become foreign. The doctors used words like severe trauma and bilateral damage and, unfortunately, permanent. They said it matter-of-factly, the way you'd discuss weather or traffic, but I watched each word hit Thomas like individual blows. "There are resources," they said. "Support groups, rehabilitation programs. People adapt. They live full lives." Thomas nodded politely, but I could see him disappearing even while he sat right there. We came home to the house we'd bought because of the light. North-facing windows that now seemed like a cruel joke, skylights that showed Thomas nothing. He moved carefully through rooms he'd known by heart, his hands trailing along walls and furniture like he was mapping a foreign country. I tried to help. I narrated everything. where I was going, what I was doing, what the weather looked like outside. I described Michael's drawings from school, the way the leaves were changing color, how the grocery store had rearranged the cereal aisle again. "You don't have to do that," Thomas said one morning, his voice tight. "Do what?" "Perform the world for me. I know what fall looks like. I'm not suffering from amnesia. I'm not performing. I'm sharing. You're pitying." That's when I understood that losing his sight wasn't the worst thing that had happened to Thomas. The worst thing was needing me in a way that made him feel like less than himself. He stopped touching me first. Not dramatically, not after a fight, just gradually. His hand would slide away when I reached for it. He'd turn his head when I tried to kiss him goodnight. He slept on his side of the bed like there was an invisible wall running down the middle of our mattress. "I don't want to hurt you," he explained when I finally asked. "I can't see your face. I can't tell if I'm doing something wrong. You could never hurt me. I could break something by accident. Step on one of Michael's toys. Walk into you when you're carrying something fragile. I could hurt you without knowing it. So we'll be careful." I don't want to have to be careful with my own wife. Michael, 5 years old and too smart for his own good, started tiptoeing around his father like Thomas was made of eggshells. He'd announce himself before entering a room, speak in whispers when Thomas was nearby, save his laughter for when his daddy was upstairs. "Why doesn't Daddy want to play trucks anymore?" he asked me one evening while Thomas sat in his chair by the window, facing glass that no longer meant anything to him. Daddy's still learning how to do things differently. "Is he sad?" "Yes, baby, he's very sad." "Will he get better?" I looked at Thomas, still as stone, and lied to my 5-year-old son. "Yes, he'll get better." But Thomas wasn't getting better. He was disappearing. He'd sit in that chair for hours, listening to audiobooks or financial podcasts, never moving except to go to the bathroom or come to bed. He stopped asking about my paintings, stopped commenting on dinner, stopped being a participant in our life, and became instead a careful observer of a world he could no longer see. The house felt like we were all holding our breath. The call came on a Tuesday morning, 3 months after the accident. Dr. Martinez from the ophthalmology department, her voice careful and professional. "Mrs. Blake, I have some information about corneal transplants that might interest you." Thomas had been on the waiting list since the hospital stay, but the estimate was 5 to 7 years. Corneas had to be a perfect match, had to come from donors in very specific circumstances. We'd talked about it once, right after the doctors explained that it was his only chance. "The wait time could be significant," Dr. Martinez continued. "However, if you had a family member willing to donate, we could schedule the surgery much sooner." Family member? The best outcomes occur with donations from spouses or siblings. The compatibility is much higher. I found myself writing down details I didn't remember asking for. Surgical procedures, recovery times, success rates. Thomas was upstairs, probably sitting in his chair, listening to the morning news describe a world he couldn't see. "What would happen to the donor?" I asked. "Complete loss of vision in the donated eye. If both corneas were donated, it would result in total blindness." "Both?" "We'd need both to give Mr. Blake the best chance at full sight restoration." I hung up and stared at the phone for a long time. Outside the kitchen window, Michael was kicking a soccer ball against the fence, the same rhythm over and over. Thunk, pause, thunk, pause. He kept looking toward the house, probably hoping his father would come outside and play with him. I didn't tell Thomas about the call right away. Instead, I spent the evening watching him, really watching, the way he felt for his coffee cup each morning, fingers searching the familiar territory of our kitchen table. How he stood at the top of the stairs for just a moment before descending, like he was gathering courage. The careful way he moved through rooms that used to be extensions of his body. That night, I lay awake listening to him breathe. He slept fitfully now, probably dreaming in colors he could no longer see when awake. I thought about 5 to 7 years. Michael would be 10 or 11. Thomas would miss Little League games, school plays, the the way our son's face was already changing from round little boy softness into something more angular and knowing. I thought about my paintings. The gallery had been patient, understanding about my extended absence. But how long could I paint when my subject was increasingly a man disappearing into himself? Then I thought about light, how it fell across the kitchen table in the afternoon, how it painted everything gold in those moments before sunset, how Thomas used to comment on it, used to notice things I missed, even though seeing was supposed to be my specialty. The next morning, I called Dr. Martinez back. I want to discuss the donation process. Mrs. Blake, this is a significant decision. You should take time to consider. I've considered it. What do I need to do? The testing took 3 weeks. Blood work, tissue compatibility, psychological evaluation. The psychiatrist asked me questions I'd already asked myself. Did I understand the permanence? Was I being coerced? What about my career as a visual artist? I paint what I see, I told her. But I've been living with Thomas for 6 years. I know how he sees things even when I'm not looking at them. Maybe that's enough. And if your marriage doesn't survive this sacrifice, people don't always respond to gifts the way we hope. I thought about that question for days. Thomas had been pulling away since the accident, building walls I couldn't see but definitely felt. There was no guarantee that giving him my sight would give me back my husband. But I kept watching Michael look toward the house, hoping. I scheduled the surgery for a Friday in November. Cold day, early winter light that made everything look thin and fragile. I didn't tell Thomas until the night before. He was in his chair by the window when I sat down across from him. The evening news was talking about traffic and weather, normal concerns of people whose biggest worry was whether to bring an umbrella. Thomas, I need to tell you something. Okay. I'm having surgery tomorrow. A corneal transplant, my corneas. To you. The silence stretched so long I wondered if he'd heard me. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. No. The doctors say there's an excellent chance. No, Elena, absolutely not. You don't understand. The waiting list is... I understand perfectly. He turned toward where I was sitting, his face aimed slightly to the left of where I actually was. You want to give me your eyes. I want to give you your life back. By ending yours. My life isn't ending, it's changing. You're an artist, Elena. You paint light. How can you paint light if you can't see it? Maybe I'll learn to paint other things? This is insane. I won't let you do this. It's not your choice. Like hell it isn't. We fought for hours. Thomas argued, pleaded, demanded, threatened. He called me crazy, selfish, dramatic. He said I was trying to make him feel guilty, trying to manipulate him into gratitude he didn't want to owe. What happens when you regret it? He asked, his voice raw. When you realize what you've given up and you start to resent me for taking it? That won't happen. How do you know? Because I love you more than I love seeing. That's not love, Elena, that's martyrdom. Maybe they're the same thing sometimes. I went to bed that night knowing I might wake up to divorce papers. Thomas stayed downstairs in his chair, and I could hear him making phone calls. To his lawyer, to his mother, to Dr. Martinez. Trying to stop something that was already in motion. But in the morning, he was there when they wheeled me into pre-op. He couldn't see me, but he found my hand and held it. I'll never forgive myself for this, he whispered. Yes, you will, I said. You'll see our son grow up, and you'll forgive everything. The last thing I remember before the anesthesia was thinking about Michael's face, memorizing it. The gap where his front teeth used to be, the freckles across his nose, the way his hair stuck up in the back no matter how much I tried to smooth it down. I wanted to remember everything about the way love looked. I woke up in darkness that felt different from sleep. Complete, permanent, thick as wool. The bandages came off my eyes 3 days later, but the darkness remained. This was the world now. Sounds and textures and temperatures, but no light. Not even the difference between day and night. Thomas recovered quickly. His bandages came off the same day as mine, and I heard the sharp intake of breath that meant he could see again. Dr. Martinez asking him to read letters from a chart, to identify colors, to track her finger as it moved back and forth. "Perfect clarity," she announced. "Better than his original vision, actually. We corrected for some existing astigmatism." "Elena?" Thomas's voice, but different now. Tentative. Can you see anything at all?" "No," I said, and listened to the quiet that followed. "But that's okay. We expected this." They sent us home with instructions and phone numbers and a rehabilitation schedule that would teach me how to navigate a world I could no longer see. Thomas drove us, the first time he'd been behind the wheel since the accident. "Everything looks exactly the same," he said as we pulled into our driveway, like nothing changed. But everything had changed. I could hear it in his voice, relief mixed with something that might have been guilt or might have been grief. I could feel it in the way he helped me out of the car, careful and gentle like I was made of glass. Michael ran out to meet us, his feet loud on the gravel driveway. "Mommy, Daddy says you can't see anymore, but he can see everything now." "That's right, baby." "Are you sad?" "No, I'm happy that Daddy can see you again." "Can you see me in your mind?" "Always." The first weeks were harder than I'd expected. Not the physical navigation, that was learnable. It was the way Thomas moved around me like I was suddenly fragile. The way he spoke to me in the overly patient voice people use with children or invalids. "There's a step here," he'd say, guiding me through our own house. "I know, I've lived here for 4 years." "Right, sorry." He'd describe things I didn't ask him to describe. Narrate the visual world with the awkward enthusiasm of someone fulfilling an obligation. The weather, the neighbors, what Michael was wearing to school. It was like he was paying me back in installments, trading observations for the sight I'd given him. But he wasn't touching me anymore. If anything, the physical distance had grown worse. Now he had reasons. I couldn't see his face, couldn't predict his movements, might be startled by unexpected contact. The space between us in bed felt like an ocean. 3 months after the surgery, I heard him on the phone with someone. A woman's voice I didn't recognize. "Claire, it's Thomas. I've been thinking about your offer." I stood in the hallway outside his office, learning to eavesdrop in a world where overhearing had become a survival skill. The consulting position, yes. I think I'd like to explore that. Claire. I'd heard him mention her before. Someone from his industry, a woman who'd started her own development firm. Ambitious, smart, the kind of person who spoke in quarterly projections and 5-year plans. "Dinner sounds perfect. I'll see you Friday." I went back to the kitchen and sat at the table where I used to paint, running my hands over the smooth surface where my easel used to sit. The art supplies were packed away now, stored in the basement along with canvases I'd never finish. That Friday, Thomas told me he was having a business dinner. "With Claire Monroe, she's offered me a consulting position with her firm." "That's wonderful. You miss working." "I do. It'll be good to feel useful again." "You're useful here." "I mean professionally useful, contributing something meaningful." I wanted to ask what our marriage was, if not meaningful. What the sight I'd given him was, if not a contribution. But I was learning to measure my words, to understand that some questions pushed against bruises that were still tender. The business dinners became regular, twice a week, then 3 times. Thomas would dress carefully for them, spending time in front of the bathroom mirror I could no longer use. I'd hear him humming while he got ready, the first time he'd hummed since the accident. "How did it go?" I'd ask when he came home. "Fine, productive. We're working on a proposal for a mixed-use development in Brooklyn." "That sounds exciting." "It is. It's good to be excited about something again." I started wondering what it was like to be excited about something again. My days had become carefully structured routines. Breakfast, housework, the mobility training sessions with Mrs. Rodriguez, who taught me to read Braille and use a cane. I was learning to be blind, but I wasn't learning to be alive in the way I used to be alive. Michael noticed before I did. "Why doesn't Daddy hug you anymore?" he asked one evening while I helped him with homework I couldn't see. "What do you mean?" He used to hug you when he came home from work. Now he just says hi and goes upstairs. Daddy's been very busy with his new job. Is he mad at you? No, sweetheart, why would he be mad? Because you can't see anymore. Daddy's not mad about that. But maybe Thomas was mad. Or maybe he was something worse than mad. Maybe he was grateful in a way that felt like a debt he couldn't repay. Maybe every time he looked at me, he saw not the woman he'd fallen in love with, but the price she'd paid for his freedom. The night everything changed, I was upstairs reading, fingers moving across Braille while Thomas worked late in his office. I heard his phone ring, heard him answer with the warm voice he used to reserve for me. Claire, I wasn't expecting to hear from you tonight. I put down my book and listened. No, Elena's upstairs. She goes to bed early these days. A pause. I've been thinking about what you said about moving forward. Another pause. Longer. You're right. I can't spend the rest of my life feeling guilty about being able to see again. My hands went still on the pages. I know it sounds terrible, but sometimes I feel like I'm in prison. She sacrificed so much, and now I'm supposed to be grateful for the rest of my life. It's not fair to either of us. I closed the book and sat in the darkness that was no longer temporary, listening to my husband plan his escape from our marriage. He talked about fresh starts and new chapters, and the impossibility of moving forward when every day was a reminder of what his freedom had cost. I think I'm falling in love with you too, he said finally. I went to bed that night knowing that I'd given Thomas my sight, but I hadn't given him back to me. I'd given him to someone else entirely. The divorce papers arrived on a Tuesday morning in March, exactly 6 months after I'd given Thomas my corneas. Michael was at school, and I was practicing in the kitchen, learning to make coffee by touch and sound, counting steps between counter and sink. The routine had become meditation, a way to prove to myself that I could still be useful in small domestic ways. I heard the footsteps on the front porch, different from the mailman's usual shuffle. More official. When the doorbell rang, I already knew. Mrs. Blake, I have a delivery that requires signature. The envelope was thick, the kind of paper that meant serious business. I signed for it and sat at the kitchen table, running my fingers over the sealed edge. I didn't need to see the contents to know what they said. Thomas came home that evening to find the papers spread across the kitchen table like evidence. Elena, you're taking Michael. I'm asking for primary custody, yes. Because I'm blind. Because Michael deserves a parent who can fully care for him. I can care for him. Can you drive him to soccer practice? Help him with homework? Make sure he's safe at the playground? I can learn. What if there's an emergency? What if he gets hurt and you can't see how badly? What if someone tries to take him and you don't notice until it's too late? Each question hit like a physical blow. I'd been asking myself the same things for months, wondering what kind of mother I could be in a world I couldn't see. But hearing Thomas say them out loud made them real in a way that felt devastating. I carried him for 9 months, I said. I gave birth to him. I've loved him every day of his life. I know, and you can keep loving him on weekends during school breaks. Weekends. The word tasted like ashes. You want to give me weekends with my own son. Elena, be realistic. This isn't about punishment. It's about what's best for Michael. What's best for Michael is having his mother. What's best for Michael is having a mother who can take care of him. I stood up from the table, my hands finding the back of my chair for balance. Get out! What? Get out of this house. Go to Claire's. Go wherever you've been going. But don't sleep in my bed tonight. This is my house, too. This is the house you bought for the woman who gave you her eyes. That woman doesn't live here anymore, apparently. I heard him leave, heard his car start in the driveway. Then I sat in the kitchen. I was still learning to navigate and cried until there was nothing left. Michael found me there when he got home from school. Mommy, why are you crying? I wiped my face and tried to sound normal. Just having a sad day, baby. Is it because you miss seeing? Sometimes. He climbed onto my lap, all elbows and knees and the warm weight of unconditional love. I can be your eyes. What do you mean? I can tell you what everything looks like. Like right now, the sun is coming through the window and making squares on the floor. And there's a bird outside, a red one. And your coffee cup has a chip on the handle that looks like a tiny bite. I held him tighter. You'd do that for me? Every day. I can tell you about everything, and then it'll be like you can see again. That night, after Michael was asleep, I called the one person I trusted to tell me the truth. Mama? Elena, mija, how are you? Thomas wants a divorce. He wants to take Michael. The silence on the other end stretched long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. Mama? I'm here. I'm just trying to understand how a man can ask God for a miracle and then throw it away when he gets it. He says I can't take care of Michael properly. Can you? I don't know. Maybe he's right. Maybe a blind mother is worse than no mother at all. Elena Carmen Santos Blake, you listen to me. I raised 3 children after your father died, and I did it working 2 jobs and speaking English I learned from soap operas. You think your eyes made you a good mother? No, but your heart makes you a good mother. Your hands make you a good mother. The way you sing lullabies and remember which stories he likes and know exactly how he likes his sandwiches cut, that's what makes you a good mother. What if something happens to him and I can't help? What if something happens to him and you can? What if he needs someone who understands what it means to be scared in the dark, and you're the only person who can comfort him? I'd never thought of it that way. My blindness as something that might make me more capable of understanding certain kinds of fear, not less capable of handling everything. Fight for him, mija. Don't you dare let that man take your baby because he's feeling guilty about what you gave him. The next morning, I called a lawyer, Sarah Chen, recommended by the support group I'd been attending, a woman who specialized in cases where disability was being used as a weapon in custody battles. How strong is his case? I asked. Honestly, in front of the wrong judge, pretty strong. Family courts tend to be conservative about anything that might put a child at risk. And in front of the right judge? We'd need to prove that your blindness doesn't impair your ability to parent. Documentation from doctors, character witnesses, maybe testimony from other blind parents who've successfully raised children. How long would that take? 6 months, maybe more. I thought about 6 months of uncertainty. 6 months of Michael wondering why his parents were fighting over him like he was property to be divided. There's something else, Sarah said. I looked into Thomas's employment situation. He's been consulting for Claire Monroe's firm for 6 months, but their personal relationship goes back longer. There are photos from industry events, dinner receipts, hotel records. He was seeing her before the surgery? It's possible. The timeline is suggestive. I sat in Sarah's office, my hands gripping the arms of the leather chair, and felt something new rising in my chest. Not sadness or self-pity, but anger. Pure, clean anger that felt like waking up after months of sleepwalking. I want you to fight, I told her. I want you to fight as hard as you can. This could get ugly, Elena. Are you prepared for that? I gave him everything I had. My eyes, my trust, my future. I'm not giving him my son, too. That night, I called Thomas. I'm not signing the papers. Elena, let's be reasonable. No, you want to be reasonable? Here's reasonable. You walked away from our marriage because looking at me reminded you of what my love cost. That's your choice. But Michael is my son, and I'm going to fight for him. You can't win this. Maybe not. But I can make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of man leaves his wife after she gives him her sight. That's not what happened. Isn't it? He hung up, and I sat in the darkness that had become my world, planning my way back to the light. The fight for Michael lasted 8 months. 8 months of depositions and court dates and character witnesses who testified about my ability to parent. My mother flew in from Phoenix and sat in the front row every day, her fierce love radiating across the courtroom like heat from a furnace. Mrs. Rodriguez, my mobility instructor, brought charts showing my progress in navigating the world without sight. Even Michael's teacher, Mrs. Patterson, testified that I'd been successfully helping with homework and attending every school event. Sarah Chen was brilliant. She presented evidence of Thomas's affair, the timeline that suggested he'd been planning his exit even before the surgery. She brought in expert witnesses, psychologists who specialized in family trauma, ophthalmologists who explained the rarity and significance of my donation, other blind parents who'd raised successful, well-adjusted children. "Your Honor," she said during closing arguments, "this case isn't about whether Elena Blake can see, it's about whether she can love. And the evidence shows that she has never stopped being an extraordinary mother." Thomas's lawyer painted me as well-intentioned but dangerous, a woman whose disability made her unpredictable, unreliable, a potential threat to her own child's safety. They brought photos of stairs and swimming pools and busy streets, as if my blindness made me forget that the world contained hazards. The judge, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and sharp eyes, listened to everything. When she finally spoke, her voice cut through the courtroom like a blade. "I've been practicing family law for 30 years, and I've seen many cases where parents use their children as weapons against each other. This is not one of those cases. This is about a mother who made an extraordinary sacrifice for her family, and a father who couldn't handle the weight of that gift." She awarded me primary custody. Thomas was granted visitation rights every other weekend, rotating holidays, one evening per week. He stood when the decision was read, his face pale, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Michael was 7 by then, old enough to understand that his parents weren't going to fix things between them, old enough to have opinions about the arrangement. "I want to live with you, Mommy," he told me that night as I tucked him into bed. "Daddy's girlfriend is nice, but she doesn't know how I like my sandwiches." "How do you like your sandwiches?" "Cut diagonal, not straight across. And the crust's off, but only if it's white bread. Wheat bread crusts are okay." That's very specific. "Daddy forgot. He made me a sandwich last weekend and cut it wrong, and when I told him, he said I was being picky." I smoothed his hair, the same cowlick that had defied gravity since he was a baby. "Daddy's still learning how to take care of you the way you need. But you already know. I've had more practice. Will you ever see again?" It was a question he asked sometimes, usually when he was tired or missing the way things used to be. I always answered the same way. "No, sweetheart, but I can see you in other ways." "How?" "I can see your kindness when you help me find something I've lost. I can see your intelligence when you read to me. I can see your humor when you make jokes that make me laugh. Those are the important parts to see." "I think you see me better than Daddy does." "We both see you. We just see different things." But Michael was right, in a way. I did see him differently now. Without the distraction of visual details, I heard things I might have missed before. The slight hesitation in his voice when he was worried about something. The change in his breathing when he was angry but trying to hide it. The way his footsteps sounded different when he was happy versus when he was just pretending to be happy. I was learning to read the world through sound and touch and smell, but more than that, I was learning to read the people I loved through everything they were beyond how they looked. My art evolved too. I couldn't paint with brushes anymore, but I discovered clay. Sculpture didn't require sight. It required touch, patience, the ability to feel form taking shape under my hands. I enrolled in classes at a community center, sitting at a potter's wheel with my fingers deep in cool, wet earth. "You have a natural sense of proportion," my instructor said during one of our sessions. "Most people rely too heavily on their eyes. You're feeling the clay's wants and needs." My first successful piece was a figure of a woman holding a child. Simple lines, no unnecessary details, but something about the pose captured the fierce protectiveness I felt whenever Michael was in my arms. I named it Safe Harbor. "Mom, this looks like us," Michael said when I showed him the finished sculpture. His fingers traced the curves of clay the same way mine had. "Can you make more?" I made dozens more. Families in different configurations, children playing, couples dancing, hands reaching for each other across impossible distances. The local gallery that had shown my paintings agreed to display them, and to my surprise, they sold. People connected with sculptures in ways that were different from paintings, more tactile, more intimate, requiring them to move around the pieces and see them from different angles. There's something honest about these, the gallery owner told me. Like you're showing us what love feels like instead of what it looks like. 3 years after the divorce was finalized, I met Dr. Aidan Liu at a medical conference where I was speaking about the patient experience of corneal donation. He was young for a doctor, maybe 35, with a gentle voice and the kind of hands that moved carefully around breakable things. "Your talk was remarkable," he said afterward. "I've been researching regenerative treatments for vision loss, stem cell therapy combined with artificial corneal implants. The early trials are promising." "Promising how?" "Partial sight restoration. Not full vision, but enough to distinguish light from dark, see large shapes, maybe even read large print." "The trials are open?" "To very specific candidates. People with corneal damage from trauma, good general health, realistic expectations about outcomes." I thought about it for weeks. The idea of seeing again, even partially, felt like hoping for something I'd trained myself not to want. What if the treatment failed? What if it worked, but not enough to matter? What if seeing again changed the person I'd learned to become in the darkness? "What do you think?" I asked Michael one evening. He was 10 now, responsible enough to have real conversations about complicated things. "Would it hurt?" "There's always risk with surgery." "But you're not afraid of being hurt." "No." "Then I think you should try, but not because you need to see again, because maybe you want to." I did want to. Not to go backward to who I used to be, but to move forward with more possibilities than I currently had. The experimental surgery took place on a gray morning in November, exactly 4 years after I'd given Thomas my corneas. Dr. Liu's team worked for 6 hours, implanting artificial corneas and injecting stem cells that might, if everything went perfectly, regenerate enough damaged tissue to let light through. "The healing process is slow," Dr. Liu explained as they bandaged my eyes. "We won't know anything definitive for at least 3 months." Michael held my hand during recovery, reading to me from the same books I used to read to him when he was small. Circle of Love, complete and unbroken. "Can you see anything?" he asked when the bandages came off. I blinked carefully, testing. For a moment, nothing. Then, gradually, the faintest suggestion of light and shadow. "Maybe," I said. "Something. A little." Over the following weeks, the something became more. Not clear vision, not the detailed world I remembered, but enough to see Michael's face as a warm blur, to distinguish between day and night, to navigate familiar spaces without a cane. "It's like looking through frosted glass," I told Dr. Liu during a follow-up appointment. "But it's more than I had. And it should continue to improve slowly over the next year or two." I looked at Michael, really looked at him, even if I couldn't see him clearly. He'd grown so much in the 4 years since I'd lost my sight. Still my little boy, but edging toward something older and more independent. "You're taller than I remembered," I told him. "I kept growing while you weren't looking." "I was always looking, just differently." The gallery opening was scheduled for a Thursday evening in late spring. 5 years after the divorce, nearly 6 years since the accident that had changed everything. I stood in front of the mirror in my bedroom, adjusting the blue dress Michael had picked out because he said it matched my eyes. "You look beautiful, Mom," he said, standing behind me. At 11, he was almost as tall as my shoulder, all legs and arms like a puppy who hadn't grown into his feet yet. "I can see you," I told him, turning around. "Not perfectly, but I can see you." "Good enough?" "More than good enough." The exhibition was called Seeing in the Dark, Sculptures by Elena Santos. I'd gone back to my maiden name after the divorce, reclaiming something that felt more essentially mine. 12 pieces displayed throughout the gallery's main room, each one carved from clay during the years when touch was my only way of understanding form. The centerpiece was a sculpture I'd finished just last month, a woman kneeling beside a child, her hands cupped around his face. The clay showed every detail I'd felt in those moments when Michael was small and sad, when holding his face in my hands was the only way to really see what he needed. "There are a lot of people here," Michael observed as we walked through the gallery doors. He was right. The space was crowded with art collectors, other artists, friends from the support groups I'd attended, even some reporters who'd heard about the story behind the work. I recognized voices: my mother, Mrs. Rodriguez, Sarah Chen, Dr. Liu. "Elena!" Sarah waved from across the room. "This is incredible. Have you seen the review in the Times?" I hadn't. Sarah handed me her phone, and I squinted at the screen, my limited vision just good enough to make out the headline: "Artist's Journey Through Darkness Illuminates Universal Truths About Love and Sacrifice." "Listen to this," Sarah read aloud. "Santos's sculptures possess an emotional honesty that comes from understanding form through touch rather than sight. Each piece feels discovered rather than created, as if the artist is revealing truths that were always present in the clay." I felt Michael squeeze my hand. "That's good, right?" "That's very good." We moved through the crowd slowly, me relying on Michael's quiet narration and my own improving vision to navigate. People approached with questions about technique, about inspiration, about what it was like to create art without sight. I answered as honestly as I could, explaining how losing one sense had somehow sharpened others. "The clay tells you what it wants to become," I told a young art student. "You just have to learn how to listen." It was near the end of the evening when I saw him, a familiar silhouette near the back of the gallery, standing in front of the sculpture of the mother and child. Thomas, older now, his hair showing gray at the temples, but unmistakably the man I'd once loved enough to give my sight. Michael saw him too. "Dad's here. Do you want to go say hi? Do you?" I thought about it. 5 years of anger, of rebuilding, of learning to be whole without him. 5 years of Michael going back and forth between two homes, two lives, two versions of what family meant. "Yes," I said. "I think I do." We walked over together, Michael's hand in mine, both of us approaching the man who had shaped our lives in ways both beautiful and terrible. "Thomas." "Elena." He turned, and I could see enough of his face to read the expression there. Something like wonder, something like regret. "This is extraordinary. All of it. Thank you. I didn't know you'd taken up sculpture. There was a lot you didn't know." He nodded, accepting the gentle rebuke. "Michael told me about your surgery, about getting some of your sight back. Some, not all. I'm glad. I'm glad you found a way to see again." We stood there in awkward silence, the three of us forming a triangle around the sculpture of mother and child. Finally, Michael spoke. "Dad, can I show you my favorite piece?" "Of course." Michael led us to a corner where I'd placed a small sculpture, one I'd made during the darkest days after the divorce. Two figures sitting back to back, not touching, but somehow connected. I'd called it separate together. "This one made me think of you and Mom," Michael said with the blunt honesty of children. "Like you're not married anymore, but you're still connected because of me." Thomas studied the piece for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was quiet. "I was wrong," he said, "about everything. About what you could and couldn't do. About what Michael needed. About what kind of man I wanted to be." "You were scared," I said. "We were both scared." "I was a coward. You gave me everything, and I couldn't handle feeling grateful every day for the rest of my life." "Gratitude's not a debt, Thomas. It's just gratitude." "I know that now. Too late, but I know it." Michael looked between us, his 11-year-old face serious. "Are you going to be friends now?" Thomas and I looked at each other. And I saw something in his expression that hadn't been there in years. Not romantic love. That was gone, buried under too much hurt. But something like the respect we'd had for each other before everything went wrong. "I think we can try," I said. "I'd like that," Thomas said, "if you're willing." The gallery was emptying out, people filtering into the spring evening with my sculptures fresh in their minds. Michael went to say goodbye to his grandmother, leaving Thomas and me alone for the first time in years. "Claire and I broke up," he said suddenly, 2 years ago. "I'm sorry." "I'm not. She was right about me not being ready to move forward, but wrong about the reason. I wasn't stuck in the past because of guilt. I was stuck because I'd thrown away the best thing in my life and didn't know how to live with that." "Thomas, I'm not asking for anything, Elena. I'm not trying to win you back or undo what I did. I just wanted you to know that I understand now what I lost. Not just you, but the man I used to be when you loved me." I looked at him with my imperfect vision. This man who had been my everything, and then my nothing, and now was something in between. That man is still there. He just got lost for a while. "You think so?" "I think people can find their way back from almost anywhere, if they really want to." Michael returned with my mother, both of them glowing with the satisfaction of a successful evening. "Ready to go home, Mom?" "Ready." As we gathered our things, Thomas touched my arm gently. "Elena, thank you for the surgery, for fighting for Michael, for showing me tonight that some things can be forgiven, even when they can't be fixed." "You're welcome. And Elena, your work tonight, it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." 2 years later, I was standing in my studio, natural light streaming through the north-facing windows Thomas had insisted on when we first bought the house. My vision had continued to improve, slowly but steadily, until I could see well enough to paint again. Not with the precision I'd once had, but with something different. A way of capturing emotion that didn't depend on perfect detail. The canvas in front of me showed Michael at 13, all angles and adolescent awkwardness, but with something in his expression that spoke to the young man he was becoming. I painted him the way I saw him now, not just with my recovering eyes, but with the deeper sight I'd learned in the darkness. "Mom, Dr. Liu is here," Michael called from downstairs. Aiden had become a regular visitor over the past year, first as my doctor, then as something more. He understood the weight of what I'd been through, the careful reconstruction of a life that had been broken down to its foundation. He was patient with my healing process, both physical and emotional. "How's the painting coming?" he asked, climbing the stairs to my studio. "Slowly. I'm still learning to trust my eyes again." "And your heart?" I looked at him, this gentle man who had helped give me back my sight and was slowly, carefully, helping me learn to love again. "My heart's getting there too." Michael appeared in the doorway, backpack slung over his shoulder. At 13, he split his time between my house and Thomas's apartment across town, but he'd adapted to the arrangement with the resilience that seemed to be his superpower. "I'm going to Dad's for the weekend," he announced. "He's teaching me to drive." "In a parking lot," I said quickly. "In a parking lot," Michael confirmed, rolling his eyes. "He's not completely irresponsible. Just mostly irresponsible," Aiden added with a grin. Thomas and I had found our way to something like friendship over the past 2 years. Not easy friendship, but real friendship. The kind built on shared history and mutual respect rather than romantic love. He'd never fully forgiven himself for leaving, and I'd never fully forgotten the pain he'd caused, but we'd learned to build something new from the pieces of what we'd been. "Tell your father I said hi," I said, hugging Michael goodbye. "Tell him yourself. You're coming to my baseball game next week, right? Both of you? Wouldn't miss it." After Michael left, Aiden and I sat on the front porch, watching the late afternoon light paint everything golden. Spring in Westchester. The kind of day that made you believe in new beginnings. "I have something to tell you," I said. "Good something or scary something?" "Maybe both. I'm pregnant." Aiden went very still beside me. "Pregnant?" "8 weeks. I wanted to be sure before I told you." Are you... How do you feel about it? I thought about the question. How did I feel about carrying another child at 35? About starting over with someone new? About the possibility of loving someone else as much as I loved Michael? Terrified, I said honestly, and happy, and grateful. For what? For the chance to do it all again, knowing what I know now. For the possibility of raising a child who'll never remember a time when I couldn't see them. I paused, looking at this man who'd helped me find my way back to light. For you. Aiden took my hand, the one that bore scars from years of learning to navigate by touch. I love you. I love you too. Even if this baby inherits my terrible eyesight and needs glasses from birth? Especially then. I'm good with people who need help seeing. That evening, as Aiden cooked dinner and I worked on sketches for a new sculpture series, I thought about the strange paths that had led me here. The accident that had taken everything and, eventually, given me everything else. The marriage that had broken to make room for something different. The darkness that had taught me new ways to see. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael. Dad says congratulations on the baby. He also says to tell Dr. Lou he better treat you right or he'll have to answer to both of us. I laughed, imagining Thomas trying to be protective of the woman he'd once abandoned, and Aiden trying to navigate the peculiar dynamics of our reconstructed family. What's funny? Aiden asked from the kitchen. Thomas is threatening to defend my honor. Should I be worried? Only if you plan to leave me after I sacrifice something major for you. Not planning on it. Good, because I'm fresh out of organs to donate. We ate dinner as the sun set outside the windows, talking about baby names and nursery colors and whether Michael would be excited or horrified to have a sibling 14 years younger. Normal conversations about a future that felt possible again. Later, as we got ready for bed, I caught sight of myself in the bathroom mirror. 35 years old, laugh lines around my eyes, silver threads starting to show in my dark hair, scars on my hands from learning to live without sight, new scars around my eyes from the surgeries that had given me partial vision back. But what I saw most clearly was something that couldn't be measured in visual acuity or artistic technique. I saw a woman who had learned that love was not about what you could give up, but about what you could build. Who had discovered that losing everything could be the beginning of finding everything else. I saw a woman who had walked through the darkness and come out the other side, not unchanged, but unbroken. I saw myself. Finally, fully, completely myself. The baby kicked, the first time I'd felt movement, and I pressed my hands to my belly, feeling the flutter of new life beneath my palms. This child would grow up hearing stories about the mother who gave up her sight for love, who fought in courtrooms and learned to sculpt by touch, who built a life from the rubble of what came before. But more than that, this child would grow up knowing that sometimes the most beautiful views come only after you've learned to see in the dark. Are you coming to bed? Aiden called softly. Coming, I said, taking one last look at the woman in the mirror, scarred and healed, broken and whole, blind and sighted all at once. I turned off the light and walked toward the sound of love waiting for me in the darkness.